Hello and welcome to the Free Fast 3 podcast edition of our newsletter for Thursday the 16th of January. And our 3 subjects this time are communication, learning strategy and perfectionism. Communication. Now, communication is a broad subject and it's one that maybe we've all got something we could work on. I know I have. I found an article and the article isn't so much a how-to, but it did have a lot of useful pointers for me for areas that we could perhaps review and all ask ourselves, is there something I could learn or develop in this area of communication that could help me? Now, some of the areas in this article are super basic, like smiling or body language. Here's the thing. Did you know that smiling and body language are important when you're making podcasts? And then there are other things that are maybe a little bit more advanced, like voice modulation or cultural awareness. How about this one? Communicating your personality in a digital world. Now, as I said, there are no quick fixes in this article, but there are useful prompts to point us to communication areas that maybe we could develop and improve in 2025. The article is called Communication Skills to Build a Stronger Career, and the link will be in the show notes. Learning strategy. Now, if you see any of my social media posts, you'll know that one of my favourite subjects is about helping organisations achieve actual performance improvement through skills development that works in the real world. Now, if your business is spending even £1 on training or skills development, it's critical to ensure that it's spent on things that directly support the organisation's priorities. I found a Harvard Business report that suggests that reality actually is very different and there are still some worrying statistics. For example, did you know that only 30% of L&D professionals are actually even measuring whether their work has a positive impact on the metrics that matter to most companies? Only 28% of training went to function-agnostic categories like management or communication training. And fewer than 5% of learning programs in large organisations even made it to the final phase. Now, the good news is this can be solved. And I've got 2 recommendations, and I recommend you do both of them. The first one is spend more time on ensuring that whatever you're doing, you are linking that skills development to a defined outcome. And you have to do both of these, spend more time and budget embedding and assessing the transfer of behaviours to the workplace. Now, obviously, if you'd like any insight or a conversation with me about this stuff, give me a shout. But the article that I'm sharing was called Linking Learning to Company Strategy, and the link will be in the show notes. Finally, perfectionism. So I've put in the email a note to the fact that on a couple of other places in the email, I have purposely misspelt the word perfectionism, maybe just to needle you or see if I can get your attention. But do spelling mistakes rile you up? Do you find yourself or your boss spending hours poring over presentations or reports to ensure that not even a single typo gets through? Now, to a degree, this is a professional approach. But in the extreme, perfectionism can be debilitating. And even worse, it can actually prevent us from actually doing the work in the first place. Now, I call myself a reformed perfectionist, and I use the word reformed very lightly. And I actually made a podcast episode on the very subject back in 2018. And when I listened to that podcast again this week, I thought 3 things. Number 1, my audio has significantly improved in the last 6 years. Secondly, Lisa and I are actually quite funny when we get together at the kitchen table and record the conversation. And thirdly, and most relevant to you, there is a huge amount of useful info in this podcast about dealing with perfectionism. So, I thought you'd like to hear it. That's my podcast recommendation for this episode. And if you or your boss could be considered perfectionists, it's a good listen. The podcast is called Overcoming Perfectionism, and the link will be in the show notes. And in fact, in the show notes, you'll have a link to that podcast episode. But via that link, you can actually listen to all of our other podcast episodes, including the podcast version that I'm recording now. That's it. And remember, as we always say, don't compare yourself to anyone else. Just try to be a little bit better than the person that you were yesterday. Have a great fortnight, and I'll speak to you soon.